Hey everyone, welcome back to the deep dive. You know, we love to get into the nitty-gritty here, and today we're tackling logistics and supply chains, but we're going way deeper than the usual buzzwords. We're going to unpack some seriously mind-blowing ideas from this book, Userchain and User Logistics. It's by Armando Cavanha, published back in 2008. Now, I know what you might be thinking. 2008 is that ancient history, but trust me on this, the concepts in this book are surprisingly relevant even today. By the end of this deep dive, you'll have a whole new perspective on how things actually get done and maybe even how you can influence that process.
It's amazing what Cavanha does in this book. He cuts right through all the jargon and gets straight to the heart of it. Logistics is about managing the flow of everything, not just goods, but services, information, everything, all to meet the needs of the end user.
So it's more than just moving boxes around.
Way more. And he makes this really interesting point that different types of companies have wildly different logistics needs. He breaks it down into three categories: technological, transformation production, and logistics distribution. To illustrate, think about a tech company building software versus, let's say, a soft drink manufacturer.
I see what you're getting at. So the tech company's logistics is all about data and communication, right?
Yeah.
Well, the soft drink company is dealing with actual physical bottles, trucks, the whole shebang.
Right on. And those differences have a huge impact on everything, from how they manage their resources to how they even measure success.
Now, one thing that really jumped out at me in the book was this whole idea of shortages and the hidden costs they can cause.
Yeah.
Cavanha argues that shortages can literally bring everything to a standstill.
Absolutely. We tend to think of shortages as empty shelves at the store, but it goes way beyond that. Imagine a vital part missing from a production line, or a crucial shipment delayed for a huge construction project.
Yeah, the book mentions that a tiny 1% increase in logistics errors can lead to a whopping 10% increase in costs. That's insane.
It's mind-boggling, right? And those costs aren't always so obvious. Cavanha uses this really striking example from the oil industry. A shortage of something as small as drilling bits can cost a company thousands of dollars every single day in lost production.
Thousands. Every day.
Yeah.
Just because they're missing drill bits. That's wild.
It is. And it really highlights why understanding these hidden costs is absolutely essential for anyone in business, really. Because even tiny disruptions can have massive financial consequences.
So how do we avoid these costly shortages in the first place? Cavanha brings up this idea of node management and uses a really clever analogy, a convoy of vehicles.
Oh, that's a good one. That's where his ability to explain complex ideas simply really shines. He says that a convoy only needs 2 spare tires to have the same level of reliability as 4 individual vehicles, each carrying a spare.
Ah, got it. Because if one vehicle gets a flat, the others can help out.
Exactly. Now apply that to your business. Node management means grouping resources strategically across different departments or even across different companies.
So instead of each department hoarding its own resources, they share a central pool, knowing they can lean on each other if something goes wrong.
It's like a well-coordinated team. Everyone's got each other's back. Not only does this reduce costs, but it also promotes standardization, which makes things like transportation and communication much more efficient.
And pooling resources means you're more flexible when the market changes too. If demand spikes in one area, you can quickly shift those resources to meet that need.
That's the beauty of it. It's like a dynamic system that can adapt and respond.
Speaking of strategy, the book delves into logistics indicators and really challenges how companies measure their performance.
Yeah, we tend to fixate on things like speed and cost, right? But Cavanha argues that we need to look beyond those basic metrics and consider things like client satisfaction, administrative flexibility, post-sales support.
So it's not just about getting something shipped fast, it's about the whole customer journey and providing value over the long term.
Exactly. And the key is to choose indicators that line up with your overall goals. It's about asking, what are we truly trying to achieve? And then measuring what truly matters in reaching those goals.
He even talks about creating custom indicator systems for different types of clients, which makes sense. Not every customer has the same priorities.
Right. It highlights the need for flexibility and customization in how we approach logistics, moving away from one-size-fits-all solutions.
Okay, we're measuring performance, but how do we know if we're actually doing well? That's where Cavanha talks about benchmarking. And honestly, I used to think that was just a meaningless corporate buzzword.
Benchmarking definitely get a bad rap, but when done right, it can be incredibly useful. It's not about mindlessly copying your competitors, it's about finding ways to improve.
So it's like looking at what others are doing well and asking, how can we learn from them? How can we apply those lessons to our own company?
That's the spirit. Cavanha outlines different types of benchmarking, like competitive benchmarking, where you compare yourself to others in your industry, and process-focused benchmarking, where you break down specific functions or processes.
The book even includes this super detailed benchmarking questionnaire. It really shows the depth and analysis required to do it right.
And he stresses that honesty is absolutely crucial. You have to be willing to admit your weaknesses and learn from others, even if they're your competitors.
But collecting data isn't enough. You actually need a plan to act on those insights, right?
Right.
Otherwise, it's all pointless.
Totally agree. And that leads us to this common idea of internal clients within companies, which Cavanha challenges head on.
Right. He uses that great example of a lawyer working for a fast food company. What was the main takeaway from that again?
Well, the lawyer's job isn't to sell legal services, it's to help the company sell more burgers. Everyone in the company, regardless of their specific role, should be aligned with that same ultimate goal.
So instead of viewing departments as serving each other as clients, we should see them as partners working together towards a shared mission.
That's it. It's a small shift in thinking, but it can have a huge impact on collaboration.
Now, to help companies decide where to focus their resources, Cavanha introduces this framework called the Complexity Criticality Matrix.
Right. This matrix is all about making strategic sourcing decisions. On one axis, you've got complexity, which refers to the supplier market. How many suppliers are there? How specialized are the products? How much competition exists?
And on the other axis is criticality, which measures how important that item or service is to the company's operations.
So you end up with these 4 quadrants, items that are both highly complex and critical. You probably want a strategic alliance with the key supplier for those.
And if it's low complexity, no criticality, you just shop around for the best price, right? But what about everything in between?
That's where things get interesting. The matrix helps you think strategically about every purchase, avoiding those one-size-fits-all approaches that often fail.
I'm starting to see the big picture here. You've got your overall goals, the indicators to track your progress, benchmarking to learn from others, and then this matrix to guide specific sourcing decisions.
It all fits together, right?
Yeah.
And it all feeds into Cavanha's larger idea of the user chain. But before we get into that, let's talk about another key concept he introduces, standardization.
When I hear standardization, I think of things like nuts and bolts, making sure everything fits together properly.
That's part of it, for sure. But Cavanha expands that thinking. He focuses on 3 areas of standardization: product services, acquisition processes, and company documentation.
So streamlining everything from how you buy things to how you keep records.
That's the idea. He uses this fantastic example of standardizing pipe diameters. Seems like a small change, but it rippled through the whole organization, making everything from inventory to installation simpler.
Right. The more consistent you are across the board, the fewer headaches you'll have later.
Exactly. It's about eliminating unnecessary complexity wherever you can.
And that simplification can lead to huge cost savings down the line. Which reminds me of another important concept Cavanha brings up, total cost of acquisition, or TCO.
Yes, TCO. This is where we go beyond just the initial price tag and consider all the hidden costs that can creep up over time.
Right, like buying a computer. The cheapest model might seem like a steal, but then you've got software, upgrades, repairs, eventually disposal.
That's it. You might save a few bucks up front, but end up paying more over the long haul if you don't factor in those hidden costs.
Cavanha has this really interesting example in the book, showing how a more expensive computer actually ended up being cheaper, because it had lower maintenance costs over its lifespan.
That's a great illustration. Understanding TCO helps you avoid unpleasant surprises and make smarter, more strategic decisions in the long run.
So we've covered a lot of ground here. Shortages, node management, benchmarking, standardization, TCO. And it seems like it's all building toward this idea of the user chain.
And that's exactly where we'll pick up in the next part of our deep dive.
Can't wait. Stick with us. Okay, so we're back and ready to unpack this whole user chain thing. It sounds like it really flips the traditional supply chain model on its head.
Yeah, it's a total paradigm shift. Instead of focusing on pushing products out the door, the user chain starts by really understanding what the end user needs and then pulls the necessary resources through the chain to meet those needs.
So the user's in the driver's seat, right? Like, hey, this is what I want and how I want it.
Exactly. It's about shifting that power dynamic and giving the user much more control over the entire process, from design and production all the way to disposal.
Cavanha really shakes things up with this book, huh? It's like he's saying, hey, what if we reimagine the entire system with the user at the very center?
He's definitely a disruptor, and one of the most radical ideas he throws out there is this concept of users being co-responsible for sustainability.
Wait, so it's not just on companies to be eco-friendly, it's on the users too. Like they're demanding it and making those conscious choices.
Exactly. Think about it. What if every time you bought something, you really considered the environmental impact, from how it was made to how it'll eventually be disposed of?
Whoa, that's a lot of responsibility on the consumer.
Yeah.
But I guess if enough people start demanding those sustainably produced products, companies will have to listen, right?
Exactly. It's like voting with your wallet. And Cavanha really believes that this shift in how consumers behave can be a major force in driving change towards a more sustainable future.
He also talks about users being involved in the innovation process, which I thought was fascinating.
Yeah.
Because who knows better what works than the people actually using the products?
Right. It's about harnessing the collective intelligence of all those users and using their experiences to fuel innovation. Instead of companies just dictating what users get, it's about working together to co-create solutions that truly meet their needs.
So it's not just about leaving a review on Amazon, it's about being involved in the actual design process.
Yeah, exactly. We see this happening already in some industries. Think about the open source software movement, where users collaborate to create and improve software. They're often pushing the boundaries and sometimes even surpassing commercial products.
That's amazing. It really shows the potential of this whole user-driven innovation model.
Cavanha believes that this approach can lead to products and services that are not only more relevant and sustainable, but also truly user-centric.
So it's not just about streamlining things and making them more efficient. It's about creating a better overall experience for the user and a better future.
Absolutely. It's a shift from that purely transactional mindset to a more collaborative and sustainable way of consuming.
But let's be real for a second. This sounds incredible in theory, but wouldn't it be incredibly hard to actually put a user chain model into practice?
Yeah, it definitely wouldn't be a walk in the park. It would require a huge change in mindset, not just from companies, but from users as well.
We're so used to just being passive consumers, picking from whatever's on the shelf. This user chain idea is asking us to step up and take a much more active role.
It's a big ask, but the potential benefits are huge. Just imagine a world where products are designed with sustainability in mind from the very beginning, where users have a voice in shaping those products, and where everyone's working together to create a more equitable and sustainable future.
That's a pretty inspiring vision. But I can't help but wonder about all the challenges. How do you convince companies to buy into this? How do you get users to change their behavior?
Those are the million-dollar questions. And to be honest, Cavanha doesn't claim to have all the answers, but he does provide a roadmap for how we can start moving in the right direction.
Okay, so where do we even begin? What's step one?
I think it starts with awareness. We need to educate companies and users about the user chain, about the potential benefits and the power they have to drive change.
So spreading the word and getting people excited about this new way of thinking.
Exactly. And then it's about taking small steps, trying new approaches, and building momentum. It's going to take time, but it's a journey worth taking.
The thing I found really interesting in the book is the whole idea of reverse logistics, which seems to be a big part of this user chain model.
Good point. Reverse logistics is all about managing that flow of goods back from the user to the producer, making sure things get recycled or disposed of properly.
So it's not just about getting the product to the customer, it's about what happens after they're done with it.
Exactly. And users have a vital role to play here. By understanding responsible disposal and getting involved in recycling programs, they're closing the loop and minimizing that environmental impact.
I really like this idea of incentivizing users to return products at the end of their life cycle, like deposit systems or trade-in programs, that kind of thing.
Great example. That's how you create a more circular economy, where products are designed to be reused and repurposed instead of ending up in a landfill.
As we're talking, I'm realizing just how interconnected everything is. It's not just individual companies or even industries. It's this whole web of relationships that spans the entire globe.
And the user chain really highlights those connections, showing how choices made by individual users can have ripple effects throughout the system.
That's like the butterfly effect. But in this case, it's about using that interconnectedness to create positive change.
Cavanha also emphasizes the importance of information flowing within the user chain. It's not just about physical products moving back and forth. It's about data, feedback, and insights being shared by everyone.
So it's transparency for the consumer, but it's also about giving companies valuable data to help them improve their products and processes, right?
Absolutely. Imagine a world where users can easily give feedback on products, share their experiences, and even suggest improvements. That feedback loop would be incredibly valuable for companies.
It's like crowdsourcing innovation,
Right.
tapping into all that collective intelligence from the user community.
Exactly. Cavanha envisions a future where technology plays a huge role in this. He talks about users having access to real-time info about products, their origins, their environmental impact, and their end-of-life options.
Like a digital passport for every product. Total transparency so users can make informed decisions.
And that transparency can really hold companies accountable for their actions. When users have access to information, they can demand better.
This is seriously ambitious stuff. But I have to say, I'm feeling a little hopeful. Maybe, just maybe, we can create a better future by working together and rethinking how we do things.
I share your optimism. It's a huge challenge, but the potential rewards are just too great to ignore.
Now, one thing that I found particularly interesting was Cavanha's discussion of upstream engineering. It's a really fascinating way to think about problem solving.
He argues that it's so much more effective to catch potential problems early on in the process, upstream, before they can snowball and create bigger issues downstream.
It's like stopping a small leak from turning into a major flood, right?
Precisely. He uses this great analogy, comparing it to a river with a bunch of dams. If there's a blockage or a leak in one of those upstream dams, it can cause havoc all the way downstream. But if you catch it early, you can prevent those downstream issues from ever happening.
So it's about being proactive, anticipating those problems, and taking steps to prevent them, instead of just reacting to them after they've already happened.
Exactly. And that shift in thinking can be applied to everything, from designing products and managing supply chains to our personal lives.
I love that. Thinking ahead, asking what can possibly go wrong, and then taking steps to mitigate those risks.
Cavanha has some really great examples of how upstream engineering can be applied to logistics and supply chains. For example, in procurement, by carefully vetting suppliers, making sure they meet your standards and share your values. You can avoid quality issues and delays down the line.
So it's not just about getting the cheapest deal, it's about finding suppliers you can trust, ones that are committed to quality and sustainability, right?
Absolutely. And in product design, by thinking about the entire life cycle of a product. From sourcing materials to disposal, you can create products that are more sustainable, more durable, and easier to recycle.
So you're thinking about the long-term consequences of your choices, not just what looks good or functions well right now.
Exactly. Even in transportation and logistics, upstream engineering plays a role. By optimizing routes, anticipating disruptions, and having backup plans, you can ensure that goods move smoothly and efficiently through the entire chain.
Makes sense. It's all about preparation, thinking ahead, and having those backup plans just in case things go sideways.
The key takeaway here is that by putting in the time and effort up front to really think things through, you can avoid a lot of headaches and heartache down the road.
As we've been digging into this user chain idea, I've been thinking about something Cavanha briefly mentions. Negotiation times in those asset-intensive industries, like oil and gas. I'm wondering if there's a connection there.
Ooh, that's a sharp observation. He points out that companies with huge investments in physical assets often have very different negotiation timelines and priorities compared to other industries.
And I think that ties in really well with this user chain concept. When you've got massive infrastructure projects, long lead times for equipment, and incredibly high stakes, that negotiation process takes on a whole new level of importance.
For sure. In those situations, the focus shifts to minimizing risks, ensuring those supply chains are rock solid, and securing those long-term contracts, the kind that provides stability and predictability.
And that's where the user chain can be really powerful. By understanding the unique needs and constraints of these industries, users can engage in more strategic and collaborative negotiations with their suppliers.
It's about forging those long-term partnerships built on trust and mutual understanding, recognizing that both sides have a vested interest in seeing that project succeed.
Cavanha also makes this interesting distinction between the upstream and downstream phases of these industries, and how they often demand different management styles and priorities.
It's a crucial point. The upstream phase, which involves exploration and production, it's all about high risks, high rewards, and the need to be agile and make decisions quickly.
Sounds kind of like the Wild West.
In some ways it is. You're pushing the limits, exploring uncharted territory, and taking calculated risks. But the downstream phase, that's refining, distribution, marketing, that's a whole different ballgame.
So it's less about exploration and more about efficiency, optimization, and controlling costs.
Exactly. It's like running a well-oiled machine. Everything needs to flow smoothly and predictably.
And those different phases require different leadership styles, organizational structures, even negotiation strategies.
Absolutely. One size definitely doesn't fit all in these complex industries. You've got to tailor your approach depending on where you are in that value chain.
Now, as we've been discussing this user chain and all its complexities, we can't ignore the big elephant in the room, risk and uncertainty. No matter how well we plan, things can and do go wrong.
Cavanha dives into this topic head-on, reminding us that we can never completely eliminate risk or predict the future with 100% certainty.
He distinguishes between risk, the probability of something happening, and uncertainty, the potential consequences if it actually does happen. Can you remind me of the difference again?
Sure. Think of it this way. You might be able to figure out the chances of a natural disaster hitting a certain area, but you can never know for sure when it'll strike or how bad it'll be. You can assess the risk, but that uncertainty always lingers.
And that uncertainty can make planning and decision-making so much harder, especially in industries with these long lead times and complex supply chains.
Absolutely. Cavanha argues that the traditional approaches to risk management, those that try to minimize the chances of bad things happening, they just aren't enough anymore. We need a more comprehensive approach, one that considers both the likelihood and the potential impact of those events.
So it's not just about stopping things from going wrong, it's about having a plan for all those what-ifs and knowing how to handle them if they actually happen.
Exactly. And this is where the user chain comes in. By encouraging collaboration and open communication between everyone in the chain, users and suppliers can work together to reduce risks, share the burden of that uncertainty, and build more resilient systems.
Imagine a world where users have access to real-time updates about potential disruptions, where they can talk directly to suppliers to understand the impact of those disruptions and work together to find solutions. That would be amazing.
That kind of transparency and collaboration would be a total game changer. It would allow for a much more effective response to those unexpected events and minimize the negative fallout.
Cavanha also talks about the importance of learning from experience, both the good and the bad, by studying what worked and what didn't in the past. We can refine our risk management strategies and be better prepared for future challenges.
It's about adopting that continuous learning mindset, knowing that we can always improve and there's always something new to discover.
So before we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with this question. How can you apply these principles of upstream engineering and risk management in your own work and life?
It's a great question to consider. Because by taking a more proactive and collaborative approach and embracing that learning-oriented mindset, we can build a more resilient, sustainable, and fulfilling future for ourselves and for future generations.
Wow, we've really covered a lot of ground in this deep dive. From those hidden costs of shortages to the power of the user chain. Now I'm curious to see how it all plays out in the real world.
One of the best things about Cavanha's book is that he doesn't just throw these concepts at you. He actually challenges you to think about how to use them practically, both in business and in your everyday life.
Yeah, and he does that with those thought-provoking questions at the end of the book. They really make you think about the bigger picture.
One that really stuck with me was, how can we actually quantify the gains we get from logistics? It forces us to move beyond just cost-cutting and efficiency and consider the true value that logistics brings to the table.
It's like we often take logistics for granted, but it's the invisible backbone of our entire economy. Everything we use, from food to clothes, relies on these complex systems.
Exactly. And Cavanha argues that we need better ways to measure the impact of logistics, not just the financial side of things, but also how it contributes to things like customer satisfaction, innovation, and sustainability.
So it's not just about moving stuff around as quickly and cheaply as possible. It's about creating value throughout the entire journey.
Absolutely. Another question that really resonated with me was, how can we deal with the unexpected in-demand logistics? Which brings us back to risk and uncertainty and that need for flexibility and resilience we talked about.
Because no matter how carefully we plan, there will always be curveballs, disruptions in the supply chain, unexpected changes in demand.
That's right. Cavanha suggests that we need to ditch those rigid top-down systems and embrace a more adaptable, responsive approach to logistics.
So instead of trying to predict and control every single detail, it's more about being ready to adapt and having those backup plans ready.
Exactly. Like having a generator at your house, You might not need it often, but when the power goes out, you're sure glad you have it.
And this is where the user chain idea can really shine, right? If everyone's in the loop and aware of potential issues, they can work together to find solutions and minimize the impact.
Absolutely. Moving away from those siloed reactive approaches towards a more interconnected and proactive way of doing things. Another one of Cavanha's questions that made me think was, how can we actually show clients the logistics errors we make? Which is tough because no one likes to admit they messed up.
True. But transparency is crucial for building trust and those long-term relationships. If you just sweep mistakes under the rug, it'll catch up to you eventually.
100%. And Cavanha believes that being open about errors can actually make those relationships stronger. It shows your clients that you're committed to constant improvement and that you're willing to learn from your mistakes.
So it's not about playing the blame game. It's about finding solutions and turning those mistakes into opportunities for growth.
Exactly. And this fits perfectly with the whole user chain philosophy, where collaboration and shared responsibility are so important. By building a culture where errors are seen as chances to learn, you create a much more resilient and adaptable system.
Now, one question that really got me thinking was, should small companies have logistics systems similar to those big corporations? Because we tend to assume that what works for the giants will work for everyone.
Right, but as Cavanha points out, that's not always the case. Small companies have to be agile and adaptable. They need to find those creative solutions that work for their specific situation and resources.
They might not have the funds for fancy software or a huge logistics team, but they can use technology in smart ways, partner up with others, and focus on building those strong personal relationships with their suppliers.
And the user chain can be a game changer for small businesses. By putting the customer first and building a network of collaborative relationships, they can really stand out in a crowded market and gain a loyal customer base.
It's about knowing your strengths and using them to create a truly unique customer experience.
And to wrap things up, Cavanha asks this crucial question. How can we build those total cost spreadsheets that help us make decisions based on the cost of use for the entire life cycle, instead of just looking at the initial price?
It's that total cost of acquisition idea again, right?
Right.
Thinking beyond just the sticker price and factoring in all those hidden costs that come with a purchase.
Exactly. And that requires a change in thinking for both businesses and consumers. We need to consider those long-term costs of ownership, use, maintenance, even disposal.
Imagine if you had that information for every product you were thinking about buying. You could easily compare the total cost of ownership, factor in sustainability, ethical sourcing, and make truly informed decisions.
That would be incredible. It would empower consumers to choose responsibly and encourage companies to prioritize transparency and sustainability.
And that brings us right back to the heart of the user chain, putting the user front and center and building a more collaborative, sustainable, and ultimately fulfilling future.
It's a powerful vision, and I think it's one worth fighting for.
This has been an amazing deep dive. I feel like I've learned so much about logistics, the user chain, and even how to be a better, more conscious consumer.
It's been great exploring these ideas with you.
Thanks for joining us on the deep dive. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.